Okay, let's get into this. Welcome to the Fine Gibberish podcast inauguration episode 1, whatever you want to say. My name is Anthony Brady, and you're very welcome to a new project. Let's see where this goes. So I suppose it's only correct and polite to begin by explaining a little bit about who I am and why the hell we're doing this, right? So I suppose the start and origin of this podcast begins probably 6 years ago, really. So 6 years ago, I actually was a big fan of writing. I still am a big fan of writing. I'm not sure if the written word is dying, along with everything else in this world. But 6 years ago, I started writing I designed a website and started writing under the banner Fine Gibberish. I'm not entirely sure where that title came from, but I did. And for about 2 years, I maintained a fairly kind of steady rhythm of writing about gigs or writing about albums, writing about whatever the hell I wanted, really. It was great. Now, the thing about that Fine Gibberish experiment is that it ran, I think it started in 2019, 2020, somewhere around there. Ran for about 2 years, and of course I don't need to remind anyone who's listening here that the world imploded on itself. COVID, etc., lockdowns, vaccines, all the rest of it, and that was a major blow. Like, gigs stopped, right? Everything stopped. So too did my Fine Gibberish kind of experiment, really. The next thing that happened in my life was my son was born, which was fantastic. And for anyone who is a parent out there, they'll, I suppose, relate to just how monumental, a life-changing, altering experience that is. So that's another couple of years on the clock and kind of brings us down. But what really, I think, I've always been kicking this idea around. I've been a fan of podcasts, and I've talked to mates, and, I've had some encouragement from friends and who said, you know what, you should do a podcast, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe there's too many out there. Everyone has a podcast. Who doesn't? So I don't know. I just couldn't find the motivation. But what has ultimately led me to this microphone here today is about a month ago, I did launch a different podcast. So this is actually the second podcast that I've up and running. The first one I did is actually directly connected to my couldn't be less heavy metal if you tried. It's to do with, in my professional life, I am a workforce management professional, and I decided to provide, I love talking about workforce management as well as talking about heavy metal, so I decided to create a podcast for it. It's called The Broadcast. If anyone is interested, you're more than welcome to go and join in on the fun over there. But I suppose what that did is that as I launched that and I got it up off the ground and I invested in a little bit of equipment and had to figure out the technology and the ins and outs about how you actually make these podcasts happen, and one or two mates kind of did reach out to me and when they heard about my business podcast, they were kind of like, oh, I thought it was going to be about metal. I saw that, Anto Brady was out there and he was doing a podcast. Surely it was going to be about metal, and there was maybe a little bit of it's about something incredibly, not metal. So I did kind of linger on that thought for a few moments and kind of went, well, you know what? In for a penny, in for a pound. It was, I've got this set up here. It's just as easy to talk about one thing as it is to talk about the other thing. So here I am, and I'm going to try and maintain two podcasts. So that's where this all kind of came from. I've already had a number of friends who reached out to me through social media to kind of say, hey, talk about Maiden, talk about Sabbath, talk about whatever. It's like, and I've really struggled with trying to figure out, like, okay, so let's do a metal podcast. Great. I could talk forever about heavy metal. I've lived a life with heavy metal, and I love kind of talking to it about it, but it's really difficult to try and figure out where you actually start. Now, to the number of mates who kind of said, hey, I'd love to hear about Maiden, and I'd love to hear about Sabbath, and I'd love to hear whatever. Absolutely, we'll get there. I promise you, I will. And furthermore, when we do get there, I am certainly not going to pretend to be any leading authority on any of those bands. But what I do know is I know something that is maybe a little bit interesting, and I do know people, friends who are infinitely bigger, and I'll do the rabbit ears, which is totally useful on a podcast, of course, but I'll do the people who are bigger fans. Like, I love Maiden, I love Sabbath, but my God, there are people in this world who, to say that they love those bands would be a gross understatement. So when the time comes, I do hope to engage those people for 15-20 minutes at a time, bring them on here, and I will try my best to unpick from their brains better information about those particular giants of rock and metal for you. So that's coming. So anyway, but where I wanted to start today was to kind of give you a little bit of about me and my origin story, right? And I think I love people's origin stories, right? Because they either fall into one of two categories, right? They either fall into that one, which is the completely made up, totally not believable. You know, these people out there who, like, when they get asked, so who was your first band? Who was your first album? What was your first concert? And somehow miraculously these people will tell you, like, yeah, I've been listening to Dark Throne since I was 3 years old. And it's the only thing I only listened to original demo tapes from, Norwegian black metal, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, yeah, and you just know, you're like, okay, mate, you're from Dublin, you're not, A, you don't look old enough, B, there's just a massive smell of bullshit off this story. It's just not true. But we all love to hear those stories anyway. Sitting around, it's like, okay, roll the eyes. Yeah, of course, you've been into early Burzum since, before Burzum was even a band. Great. And then there's the other ones who, you're kind of like, I love the real surprising ones where, you see these real serious metal types who are, they've got the look, right? They look grizzled, long hair, tattoos, piercings, and they might turn around and surprise you one day and say, oh yeah, the first band I ever got into was, like, I don't know, Depeche Mode or I don't know, Kylie Minogue or something. It's they tend to fall into these sort of camps. So anyway, you tell me which camp I fall into. So here it goes, right? So where did it all really start for me? This passion for music and in general, and this passion for rock and metal. Really, there are two people in my life that I have to thank a lot for introducing me to music, right? The first person is my mom, right? My mother. So my mom was a record collector, and amongst her eclectic taste, amongst there, some of her favorites was ABBA, and she was also a big Motown fan. And I remember being, as a kid, being just drawn to these. What are these records? What are they? Show me, play them for me, show me how they work. And once I figured out the mechanics of, okay, so there's a whole shelf over here of these things, and you can go through them and take one out at a time, take them out, put them on the record, music comes out. I remember kind of exploring every one of these, and ABBA was one of the ones. And as a kid, like, I really, ABBA was magic. ABBA is magic still. Love them or hate them, those guys, they understood melody, they understood hooks, they understood, the construction of a song. They knew how to make you move, whether you were any good at moving or not. Yeah. So anyway, my mother, ABBA. ABBA was a huge kind of star. Also Motown, kind of Diana Ross, Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson. We won't linger on Michael Jackson too long. But anyway, my mother. Now, the other person in my life which is incredibly important in the story, is actually not my father. My father is not a music person at all. He's a sports person, really. But my father's brother, i.e. my uncle, was the other important person. So his name is Bernard, and Uncle Bernard, to me, first of all, Uncle Bernard was a priest, which is, a very interesting part of this story. But Uncle Bernard was a priest. He was out there in Kilnacross Abbey in County Cavan, and he also served in places around Scotland and England and things like that. But the thing about Bernard is that when he would come to visit our house, he was always very interested in, one of the first kind of questions he would always ask me and my sister, he would ask me is, what are you listening to? He was always kind of very interested to hear what it is. Are you listening to anything, or are you listening to something? And I remember at the start, it was kind of like, yes, I'm listening to ABBA, which didn't go down well with him, right? He was kind of like, oh, okay, whatever. He wasn't an ABBA fan. Now, I was born in 78, so fast forward to about 85. So I think I was 8 years old, something like that. And I think it's a bit blurred in my mind, but one of the important events in my musical journey was Live Aid. Okay, so the great charity concert event in Wembley Stadium, 1985, Queen, right? So Queen, for anyone who hasn't seen it, put down whatever it is you're doing, go find that 22 minutes of absolute music perfection. The greatest live thing that was ever existed. I mean, I've watched it, no joking. I think I've watched that particular piece of footage a million times, and every time it still raises the hairs on the back of my neck. Almost brings me to tears every time I watch it. It is just phenomenal. And it was around about this time where that happened, and Uncle Bernard coming to visit and then asking that question, what do you listen to? And as soon as I mentioned Queen, as soon as Queen was mentioned, it was like, okay. And it was like something from a movie or something. It was like, okay, the time is right. And he just produced. It's like as if he had them on his person this whole time, just waiting for the right moment. He then handed over cassettes, right? So this was in the 80s. We were into cassettes now. So he handed over Queen and also AC/DC. I hadn't mentioned AC/DC. I didn't know who AC/DC were. I was only 7 years old. But I had kind of found my way through ABBA to when Live Aid rolled around. I was absolutely watching that, and now I'd found Queen, which then in turn led to my uncle saying, okay, here you go. If you're liking Queen, here you go. Here's more Queen, and also while we're at it, here's AC/DC. That was it. That was the world changed forever, right? So I then consumed these tapes and like played them to death, wore them out, and then every time Bernard would come, he'd kind of bring more and take back the other ones. He'd kind of say, "Oh, give them back to me." I'm not sure if he'd ever, looking back now, kind of, why did he not just record them for me? But I think that was probably beyond the scope of his technical ability. But anyway, steady diet of AC/DC tapes, and then I think that led then to the occasional sort of Black Sabbath or something in there. But AC/DC was the thing. I loved Queen, but AC/DC was this new thing, right? AC/DC was this kind of like thing for me, which is like, okay, what the hell is this? This is new for me anyway, even though I later found out that it was far from new. But this was it. And I traveled through time in a kind of an obsessive haze of just consuming over and over and over again, listening to listening to Power Age, listening to Back in Black, listening to Let There Be Rock, listening, all of these one after time and time and time again. I knew these songs upside down, inside out, and this continued and continued. Then I suppose, like a lot of people particularly in Ireland, when MTV then rolled around, it's like, oh my God, now it's on the television, and it's like, and the Headbangers Ball was there, and and more than just Headbangers Ball. There was all sorts of programs where where you could find. It just opened up this unlimited universe to all sorts of cool things, such as Metallica, dare I even say Bon Jovi. They were, catchy as hell, and they seemed at the time like they were hard rock, and kind of cool. And as a kid, of course, you're drawn to anything that's cool. But I suppose the next part of my journey is after the AC/DC obsession, and then falling into MTV. MTV is kind of really what led me to Aerosmith. What can I say? I mean, now I fell into Aerosmith right at kind of 93, 94, just as kind of what was the album? Get a Grip. I fell into Aerosmith at that time, and I remember they were the first. It in fact was some, back to our friends with the made up stories. Like, what was your first? What was the first record you ever bought? And no, it wasn't Dark Throne. For me, it was Get a Grip. I remember distinctly doing chores for my mum, hoovering and whatever it took, get a few quid together, went into HMV, I picked up Get a Grip, and it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Now I own a record, now I own my own album. I got, this is mine. This isn't like something that, was passed on to me now from my uncles. This was now mine. And so now began the obsession with Aerosmith. I then remember, like, the next time I got a few quid together, going back to HMV, going, right, well, I got to get more of this Aerosmith thing. And HMV was very good in the day. Like, they used to kind of chronologically, first of all, alphabetically, you'd find your band, so it was easy to find Aerosmith. Then it was done kind of chronologically, and I remember kind of looking at the Aerosmith section and going, holy shit, how many albums has this what have I stumbled into here? Because, like, here I am, like, okay, right, I got the record Get a Grip here, and I'm looking backwards in the catalogue, and I'm like, oh my God, there is, like, it just goes back and back and back and back. So I was like, my young teenage brain just came to the conclusion, okay, I guess there's nothing for it, let's just start at the start. So I just picked the record, which was Aerosmith self-titled, picked it off the shelf, brought it home. Oh my God, it sounded so different. It was 70s Aerosmith. It was, not like this 90s sort of highly produced kind of thing. Now we were into kind of pure 70s rock, and I just worked my way through it. Every time I had a few quid, straight back in, okay, give me the next one. And that was kind of like how this was my origin story. Somewhere, I think it was probably the MTV that led me to Metallica, because we were into Black Album era. You couldn't avoid Enter Sandman, etc. And I remember buying the Black Album and kind of again thinking, oh my God, I'm just the coolest kid, the kind of stuff I'm listening to, little did I know it was only just kind of, around the edges of it all, really. But this is kind of my origin story. The other thing about Metallica as well is that I remember, back to my Uncle Bernard, who is incredibly important in my story. So there was a moment, by the way, this is like one of my favorite kind of almost happened stories. Is like, so 91 Aerosmith, or no, sorry, 91 Monsters of Rock, AC/DC, Donington Park, supported by Metallica and I think Pantera. My uncle was going to that, or my uncle went to that, and he offered to bring me. And my mother, the ABBA-loving Motown person, was having none of that. No way was her. So I'm trying to think what age I would have been. I was kind of 12, 13. No way. There's just no way it's happening. No chance, no how. And I remember pleading, going, oh, come on, and Uncle Bernard will bring me, and just no way. So I didn't, long story short, I didn't go, and it was devastating. And of course, for anyone, we've all seen that footage was recorded, AC/DC live at Donington. What I wouldn't give to go back in time and see that, and how and ever. But the reason why this crossover with Metallica is because I remember, like, soon after that then, having conversations with my Uncle Bernard about Metallica, And I was kind of like, hey, do you know, these are kind of cool, aren't they? Have you heard this, like Enter Sandman and all this? And Bernard had this attitude because he had seen them at Donington, and he was just like, it's just noise, it's noise, just trasher noise. It's not real. It's whatever. It's not serious. And I remember having to kind of, because just kind of nod politely and kind of going, oh yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right, but in the back of my head, kind of going, "No way, are you right? This Metallica are absolutely cool." So anyway, that's where Metallica fit in, and I think I don't know whether we'll get some people on and we'll talk to them and see if their origin stories see what they're like. But I think most people, when they get into metal, there's almost like this sort of urge to find the thing that is progressively faster and harder and heavier, right? So like I think once you kind of you start developing a taste, right? And my taste again started with AC/DC, like Queen, really, AC/DC. Then that starts to morph into a bit of Metallica. Guns N' Roses are in there. Now you're starting to feel like, oh yeah, I'm into guys who take drugs now. You're kind of seeking out, okay, well, there's nothing heavier than this, surely. And I remember the thing that I ran into, and again with the assistance of Headbangers Ball and MTV and Headbangers Ball, I remember the thing that I ran into that was both heavier and also palatable, right? In so much, so Headbangers Ball was interesting for me because like it was serving me up, hey, here's Metallica, great. But then it would kind of like serve up something that was just so far beyond my comprehension. It was noise, right? So like it wasn't unusual at that time for like I'd be staring at Headbangers Ball and be like, okay, here's something, and then it'd be like, boom, here's Deicide. And my young 14, 15-year-old ears was like, oh Christ, like what is that? So you kind of balk against it, but you don't want to tell anyone that because it's like you don't want to admit to someone going, oh, it was too heavy. So I remember the first thing that I found that was kind of into my ears anyway, that was heavy enough, that was kind of you kind of inch your way into it, was Sepultura. I remember like when I found Sepultura, I'm pretty sure it was a Rise. I remember thinking, oh my God, like, and then that's it. That's your new boundary, right? That's like, this is the edge of the world now. That's it now. There's nothing heavier than this, but that's the way it works. That's the way at least I think it works, right? Then you kind of settle in, and after a while, you've listened to enough Sepultura that suddenly Sepultura just starts to sound to your ears like easy going, kind of somewhat easy for your ears, and then the next heavier thing kind of catches your attention, and so on and so on. So anyway, so that was kind of me now well into the weeds now of like, I've now found my way through my teenage years, through hard rock, classic rock, heavy metal. I found my way into Metallica, I found my way into Sepultura. I'm now deep into things like Headbangers Ball. I'm now finished my schooling, 97, and I didn't go to college immediately, and I took a job in Swords in Dublin, in a factory, and it was in this factory then where I was then exposed to a whole new world of people, and it was through one of those people that I met there, who was 10 years older than me. We clicked off, we just clicked, and we had this like, oh my God, you like metal, I like metal, what do you know, oh my God, he's 10 years older than me, he knows way more, he knows everything. But I suppose the thing that he introduced me to in a big way was Black Sabbath, right? Now my Uncle Bernard had been going on about Black Sabbath, but I never really got it. I didn't get the significance of Black Sabbath really. 97, I'm now face to face with someone who's looking at me going, oh my God, if you don't know anything, know this: Black Sabbath is the center of the universe. So I was kind of like, oh, okay, right, let me give it more attention. So I did, and I was like, oh yeah, it's fucking cool. It's heavy. It's it's undeniable. And it was around that time, as we all might remember, or you may not remember. Maybe you're young and you don't remember this at all. But this was the Black Sabbath. '97 was around about the time of the Black Sabbath reunion. So march on to 1998, Ozfest, Milton Keynes in the UK, Black Sabbath are headlining. It was a no-brainer. Went over. Now, there was also other things at that. Pantera were at that, and I'd fallen in love with Pantera in a big way. And I thought that they were going to be the only thing for me. This was original Pantera, of course, not the largely watered down version that's getting served up these days. But yeah, the thing that blew me away, of course, was had an awareness of Black Sabbath, but then we got to the end of it. Ozzy did a solo performance, which was incredible, and then he went off, and then he came back on, and he fronted original Black Sabbath, and it was like hero. I was kind of transported back to that Uncle Bernard moment again. It was suddenly like being handed those AC/DC tapes again. Suddenly I was like, oh my God, look, the power, the absolute power that's just getting served up in front of my face here. And that was it then, and now of course I'm beyond my teenage years. I've got AC/DC, Black Sabbath in my pocket. I've now earned a bit of money, and all of that money, and I mean all of that money, was now going on the purchasing of more and more. We're into CDs now, but of course we're into CDs, records, and an unconsumable passion for gigs and festivals. And so began a lifelong journey of, I think I went to my first Dynamo festival in the Netherlands in '99, and yeah, then I found my way to Maiden, and on and on and on and on. But we're long past my origin story. This is kind of like just how I kind of found it all. Other things that were kind of, I think a large part of if we're to kind of talk about origin stories, or what was part of it for me, I think I'd be remiss to not mention Bruxelles Bar in Dublin, and also Fibber McGee's. But Bruxelles was the main gig for me. I don't know what everyone else was going there for, but I was going there primarily like underage drinking, whatever, right? It's a rite of passage in Ireland. If you're not underage drinking, you're not alive. But when I was going to Bruxelles, it had a jukebox, and I went there with a mate of mine religiously, and my main motivation, other than getting a couple of sneaky points in, was to, again, this was a place to hear metal, and the sound in Bruxelles was phenomenal, loud, probably dangerously loud, looking back, but whatever. But yeah, Bruxelles was a huge part of it. Fibbers, of course. Fibbers was a bit of a different animal, because it was of course a blend of metal, but also a lot of alternative, which was, and I hope to, in future episodes, talk a little bit about attitudes, right? And, I definitely had, I want to try and break down this whole idea of people's attitudes to music. I don't know why people have it. And I definitely had it. We all did. But it was so silly. And, in the moment, when you're in the moment, you can't see it. What I mean by silly is that, like, for some reason, it was like, as we were marching through our journey in the 90s of, this band is cool, it became a compulsion to kind of also back it up by, it almost became more important to state the bands you absolutely don't like, because this band sucks, this band is terrible, it's like blah, blah, blah. Now, as the years went by, you kind of look back and go, what was I thinking? Why was it so important for me to go out on a limb and state that, I didn't like Nirvana, or I didn't like Soundgarden, or I didn't like whatever, because quote unquote they weren't heavy, right? They weren't metal, they weren't extreme, they weren't, screechy guitars and, I love Satan, whatever. Totally ridiculous points of view, of course, because, as you grow up, you go back and you listen back and you're like, of course Soundgarden and Nirvana were absolutely amazing bands. True, they weren't like, metal, heavy metal or whatever that is, right? but there is something in the heavy metal psyche, which is that as you're kind of finding your way through it, it's all about kind of, it forms part of your identity, and part of forming your identity is about, displaying to the world quite visually and vocally, this is who I like, this is who I love, this band is cool, and therefore the other bands are not cool or whatever. I think that's a part of the reason why a lot of us in heavy metal were quite drawn to the idea of displaying our favorite bands on our jackets in the form of patches and pins and all the rest of it. But yeah, anyway, so let me get back to circle. Oh yeah, now this is another thing I wanted to just kind of mention in this opening kind of origin story as well, which is important. My journey into metal was somewhat linear to a point, and then there over the years, right? Here's what I want to say is that particularly I think in the 90s and into the 2000s, right, there was so many different things going on, right? So like particularly in the 90s, right, all these different subgenres start kicking off, right? So you got thrash metal, you got death metal, you got black metal, industrial metal. They're all kicking off. There was way too much going on for any mere mortal to consume with any degree of coherence, let's say it that way. I have certainly, over the years, in recent years, I've kind of gone back. So my musical journey has kind of been almost kind of linear, and then it starts to circle back on itself. So I kind of, particularly like with a genre like black metal. Black metal was something that I firmly decided a long time ago, okay, this stuff's not for me. I don't understand it. It doesn't sound good to me. I just don't get it. But it was like but as the years went by, it was kind of like almost like this morbid curiosity as to, like, there's got to be something to it. I'm not understanding something here, because it's clearly loved by a lot of people, and I don't understand why they love it. And so I kind of worked on it, and again, I'll talk about that in a different episode. But the important bit, the point I want to make here is that there's a lot in heavy metal. So anyone who might be listening to this and who is of a younger age and is kind of, I don't know, maybe looking for guidance and advice as to where they should start, the answer to that one is always easy. You start with Black Sabbath, but after that, then where you go after that is anywhere you want, right? Whatever floats your boat, whatever is sounding good to you. Try to avoid the peer pressure of, like, being in a circle of friends, and because your friends are all saying, we're all listening to Deicide, or we're all listening to whatever, therefore you should too. I know it's hard to resist that. If you're not feeling it, then just move on. Just keep. The important thing to do is just keep listening to something. Don't get I don't know. Don't get too bent out of shape that that your taste is developing differently to the people around you. Trust me, metal heads, really, like, most of them would surprise you that a lot of what they say is bravado. A lot of what they say is for show. Even the most extremo people, the ones go around with the Cradle of Filth t-shirt with the Jesus is a what on the back, and even those people, if the truth be told, I guarantee if you were to go and fly on the wall in their house or whatever like that, you'll find they have those moments where they stick on, I don't know, but like, whether they stick on ABBA or whatever it is, heavy metal is a fantastic music, but it's not the kind of thing I don't think anybody consumes metal 100% of the time, all the time. even though a lot of metalheads would like you to believe, excuse me, a lot of metalheads would like you to believe that that's what they, in fact, they do. Get it? So yeah. Oh yeah. So anyway, that's 35 minutes of me kind of introducing myself and where this podcast came from and a little bit of my own origin story. I want to do these episodes maybe once a month, because I am committed to doing my boring business one once a week. So there's only so much waffling into a microphone one man can do. I'm gonna just wrap it up there and leave it there. To the people who contacted me saying I want to hear you talk about Maiden and all this, like I said, I do know people who their devotion to certain bands. Like I know the people in the world who are absolutely unbelievably devoted to Maiden, people who are devoted to Sabbath, even AC/DC. I would have once thought that that my love for AC/DC couldn't be surpassed. How could anyone love AC/DC more than me? But really, I'm only in the halfpenny place when it comes to that thing. The people who love AC/DC, it's almost kind of religious, really. And I've done some crazy things. Like I traveled all the way to Sydney for 5 days just to catch an AC/DC gig there. And I would have once, like, I thought, oh yeah, that's pretty. I used to kind of question my own sanity for doing something like that, but compared to some people who I do know, that's just a perfectly mundane story compared to some of the stories that they've gotten up to. So yeah, we'll do that. We'll get people on. We'll have a bit of a laugh, and we'll talk more. If anyone wants to contact me, please do. Any suggestions about stuff we want to stick on here, please let me know. It only works if you kind of let me know you're there and tell me what you want. Hopefully you enjoyed this opening episode of our new the resurrection of Fine Gibberish. Hopefully there's no more pandemics lurking around the corner to kind of knock it all off track. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and then I'll get busy editing this and put it out into the universe. Leave it there, and I will talk to you all again in about a month. See you later.